Ready, set, let's go. So it's good to know this, what we're going to talk about right now is specific to Iowa State's admissions process. So every school has a little bit different, different criteria, selection criteria. So it's good to double check with those different schools as well. For those of you who are from Nebraska that are, tuning in, our process is very similar, but please reach out to Dr. Renee McPhee for kind of details on that. And I'm going to put her information in the chat here. I lost my chat box. Hopefully I can find it again here. There we go. There it is. It was hiding from me. So if you are a Nebraska student from the state of Nebraska, go ahead and reach out to Dr. McPhee if you have questions specifically on that. They do select the 28 students who are coming into that 2+2 program that we have with Nebraska. So, so it's good to reach out to her as well. But just wanted to kind of make that, kind of PSA, if you will, that, this is specific to Iowa State. Okay, so what happens? You hit submit. VMCAS, you've submitted and paid for your VMCAS application. You've submitted and paid for that supplemental application. Both of those are required when you're applying to Iowa State. And both of those, again, have that deadline of September 15th at 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. So, so that supplemental, though, you can either do that online, or you can print off the signature page and send in a check to our office if that is more convenient for you. I think in the day and age we're in, I'm assuming that first one where you pay it online is more convenient, but that's okay. So you hit submit. VMCAS receives your application. We receive your supplemental application. VMCAS is going to, at that point, if you've signed up and paid for that professional transcript entry, VMCAS is going to begin that when all of your transcripts have been received. Whether you have or have not done that, VMCAS is going to start their verification process. So essentially taking your transcripts that you've sent in and matching that with what you have entered in VMCAS. If there are issues with that or discrepancies with that, they're going to contact you and essentially send it back to you and say, hey, you need to fix this. That will start once at least one reference is in. So you can hit submit on your application with letters of recommendation pending and with transcripts pending, which means that you've said, hey, I've taken these classes at this place, but that college or university has not sent in that transcript. You need to request that, but if they're slower on getting transcripts in and you want to hit submit, quote unquote early, you can do that as well. But so those are the two things that can kind of be pending when you hit submit on your VMCAS application. And then applications are reviewed by Iowa State once they're verified in the system. So this is kind of what that looks like. So I would say probably many of you are in this in progress status right now. You're working on your application, you haven't hit submit yet. Then once you've hit submit, your application will be classified as received. That means that you've paid, but you don't have all of those letters of recommendation or transcripts. So when you've been completed, you'll see here all of your transcripts have been received by VMCAS, and they are working on that, that transcript verification. Not all of your letters of recommendation have to be received, though, by that completed time, or in that completed status. They all have to be in though by September 15th. And then once a VMCAS has verified all of those transcripts, then it's in that verified status, which which is when we start looking at those. We will go back through and look at the received and completed status or applications that we see in those two statuses. That's only after we've kind of gone through all of our verified applications though. So every once in a while there's like some issues with VMCAS, and you know, a student will hang out in this completed status. We would go back and review that after we've made it through all of the verified applications. Okay, so in general, this is what we're looking for. We look for 50% of your application comes from our academic review, which is the R required science GPA. So we calculate that based on the coursework that you have taken that matches our required science GPA. It's not a general science GPA, which you'll find calculated for you in VMCAS, but it's our science requirements. And then we look at about the last 45 credits. However, we don't split terms. So that might be a little bit more than 45 credits depending on when that falls. So those are the two GPAs that we look at. We no longer look at the GRE. You may turn in GRE scores, how, you know, for some people, or, you know, for other institutions, but we will not evaluate the scores in any way. Then we have this committee review, which essentially is going to cover everything else on your application: essays, awards and honors, experiences, all of that kind of good stuff. We no longer interview as well. So that interview was taken out a few years ago now. So we no longer interview. So I had a question about, does the supplemental application take place of the interview? No, we've always had that supplemental application. Essentially, we've weighted the committee review as 50 points instead of, it used to be 25 points for a committee review, 25 points for that interview. So it's now all part of that committee review. Great. Okay. We've got a question here. Sorry, it just caught my eye about the GRE, and I want to tackle it since we're on that topic. If you sent a score to a school, a GRE score to a school, but on the check status page, the school doesn't show it as accepted. I'm not sure what the cause of that could be, Carly. So what I would say would be to contact VMCAS about that. Yeah, that's a VMCAS question, especially since we don't require that GRE. The academic review, oh, this is where I was supposed to talk about, kind of go more in depth, but I think we covered all of this. Kathy, do you want to talk a little bit about last year's GPA cutoff?
Okay,
or
sure.
GPA cutoffs in general?
Every year, the admissions committee determines the science course GPA, what the academic cutoff or the GPA cutoff for that will be. This year it was a 3.0, which is quite high for us, but we also had quite a few applications. And the year before that, it was a 2.5. It's ranged 2.8, 2.9, 2.5, 3 is the highest we've had it. And so that is determined after the applications are in, because it's based on the number of applications and the quality, the academic quality of the applications for that year. And so I can tell you last year's, I can't tell you what this year's is going to be.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. For the science GPA, which specific classes are used to calculate that? So we use let's see, help me out here. General Bio 1, General Bio 2, Gen Chem 1, Gen Chem 2, Organic Chemistry 1, plus the labs for those. Anatomy and physiology.
Yeah.
Physics,
Genetics. I think that pretty much covers it.
biochemistry.
On our website, they are marked with asterisks, but they're going to be the courses you expect to be science courses. It doesn't include English composition or oral communications, electives, science, or social sciences and humanities. So you look at them, you can figure out, but they do have asterisks next to them on our website.
Yeah. Great question. Oh, it jumped up real quick. Where did it go? There we go. For the last 45, okay. So for the last 45 GPA, is it the last 45 hours completed or the last 45 hours of undergraduate work?
I was just answering that one.
Oh, okay.
It was, I'm almost done, so I'll send it through too, but it is the last 45 credits taken, or 52 credits, depending upon when terms end. The only caveat to that is with graduate work, we only use didactic coursework. That is classroom, you sit there, you learn about immunology, or you learn about cell processes or whatever. We do not use research, we do not use seminar, we do not use thesis, any of those kind of general courses which are not actual classroom coursework. We do not use those, and so we would skip over those in calculating that last 45 if you have graduate work.
Great, perfect, thank you. Okay, I think I tackled most of the questions in that way. But Kathy, you might go back and find some more too. But will elective science courses
this after we're done, because there's a lot of good questions.
There are, yeah. Will elective science courses be included in the science GPA? No, it's just our required science courses. Let's see. And then actually, since I think this is probably the best time to tackle, I've gotten a good number of these questions as far as pending coursework, and will those be evaluated in some way? So like, would we use summer courses included in the last 45 GPA, all of that kind of stuff. Can you kind of tackle that in a nutshell, Kathy?
Basically, anything that is planned, we can't use, but we need to know it. As for GPAs, it would be considered in your GPA, say in when we recalculate them, because maybe you took it in the fall. Is there a specific question, Deanna?
Well, so like, so I think that's essentially what we're getting at, is that for that initial round, when you submit VMCAS, any transcripts that you have sent to VMCAS will be used in those calculations. So if you wait until the end of summer to submit and you get that summer class in, we'll use it.
We'll use it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then we'll recalculate that after the fall semester grades are in. You'll turn those into us as well.
Yes. One thing I want to tell people that sometimes people don't understand, the academic review is totally separate from the committee review. The committee will not see your transcripts. They will not know your GPAs or anything like that unless you disclose it in some of your essays or your explanation statement. They do not see any of that when they are evaluating your application in order to They determined years and years ago that there was too much bias by somebody having a 4-point, therefore they must have good experiences and good references, or somebody having a lower GPA, well, they can't be quite as good. And so they do not see any of this. This is done in our office with my staff. And so you really don't have to worry about, okay, if I take this course now or this course later, things like that. They do not see any of that. So I like people to know that, because a lot of people spend a lot of time agonizing over, should I put this down? They know I'm going to do this? And it won't matter for coursework.
Great. Okay, perfect. And I think that that's a good transition. So we do that academic review, and then we're going to move on to the admissions process. Keep those questions coming. I promise at noon, we're literally just going to go question by question by question and get those questions answered. So if we haven't gotten to your question yet, believe us, we're seeing it. We just are trying to kind of keep us rolling and our thoughts a little bit organized too. So thank you for those questions. Man, there are some really good ones. So let's kind of, like Kathy said, move on to that committee review. So after students go through that academic review, then their application is sent to our committee. We have a committee of, are we at 25 or 22 or something like that members now? And they are people, they're faculty members, veterinarians in the field, kind of experts, and your application will be seen by 3 of those committee members. So each application is reviewed by 3 people to make sure that everybody gets kind of a fair view, and we can kind of balance out those scores. So in that committee review, essentially they're covering all of these things here, and we'll break down a good portion of those here coming up, including I think the one that we've gotten, experience and letters of recommendation are the 2 things that we've gotten the most questions about. So let's start with experience, and then we'll head on to letters of recommendation. So people, a lot of times, it's hard to figure out, okay, where do I put this specific experience? What do I list it under? Stuff like that. So this is kind of a nice flow chart from the AAVMC that kind of helps you kind of figure out maybe what should this experience be listed at. So you can kind of see there, obviously, if it's research, you want to put it under research experience. If you were working with animals, but you weren't kind of working elbow to elbow with that veterinarian, then it would be employment or, animal experience. Then it would be considered animal experience. If you're working elbow to elbow with that veterinarian and really seeing what the veterinary profession is all about, that is veterinary experience. So any of those categories, if you have things that fall under any of those categories, we want to know about it. Even in that, was it related to animals? No. Chances are that still is helping you develop your communication skills, professional skills. So let us know about those sorts of things too. General, employment or general volunteering is really great to let us know about as well. Okay. So let's talk just a little bit about general work experience. So you want to make sure that you don't leave this blank unless you've never worked. If your only paid employment is listed under veterinary or animal experience, just put a note there, just say something as far as work experience goes. A lot of students, like I said, kind of fall into that line of thinking of, oh, well, if it doesn't have to do with veterinary medicine, they don't want to know about that. But we do. A lot of veterinary medicine is working with people, whether that's your coworkers or whether that's your clients. So let us know about the people skills that the times that you've spent time with people too. So definitely include work experience. And I should say these experiences can be taken, thank you, Madeline, I see a question there from you. These can be taken from high school or undergrad. So either one, you can tell us about high school experiences or undergrad. So let's move on to the big question. What is animal experience? What is veterinary experience? How do I enter that? All of that kind of stuff. Don't think we have, okay, sorry, Kathy, I was thinking, I don't think we put in a slide about COVID, how COVID impacts experience.
Oh.
So I want to make sure that I get that because that was a lot of the questions about that. So, so animal veterinary research experience. So, you know, make one entry per place of employment. So if you started out as a kennel tech in the back and then you kind of quote unquote graduated to like a veterinary assistant where you're in that exam room or in that, you know, surgery suite or out on that farm, make that one thing, make that like veterinary experience, and then there's a description. So in that description, you can say, hey, you know, I've done this and this and this. Pets, unfortunately, are not qualified, do not qualify as animal experience for Iowa State. Some schools will evaluate pet ownership as experience. So just because, you know, if you're applying to one of those schools, essentially we're just going to kind of, you know, say, okay, they owned a pet and kind of gloss over that information, not kind of count it as those animal experiences. The same thing as college coursework. We're not going to dock you if you put it in there because we understand you're applying to multiple schools. We just aren't going to evaluate that because we're looking for that time where, you know, you are taking the initiative and you know, kind of working with those animals. So things like showing animals works, you know, helping out on your family farm works, you know, training, if you're doing any animal training, that would work. But just general pet ownership doesn't work or isn't evaluated by us, I should say. Also, please, 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 don't practice veterinary medicine without a license. I know sometimes, you know, students are really excited to get in and work on those clinical skills. We will teach you those clinical skills. This animal veterinary and research experience is all about learning more about the profession. And then really kind of go with quality, you know, look for those places, those experiences, tell us about those experiences that are quality experiences. So, you know, putting, you know, tens of thousands of hours might not be as beneficial as maybe, you know, having those, you know, highlighting those experiences where, man, you really had some in-depth, you know, learning about the profession. So as far as that goes, if those experiences, and these are our top two questions right now, I think are our top question right now. So if your experiences were cut short due to the pandemic, you can absolutely make a note of that in the description of the experience. You can also use that special or that explanation statement or the special circumstances, you know, area in BIMCAS. I think it's the explanation statement.
It's the explanations.
Explanation statement. Okay. To maybe talk about how COVID has impacted those experiences. So definitely put that in. We will take that into consideration.
Deanna,
yeah.
I just want to comment here. We say do not I want to make sure they understand what I mean by do not practice veterinary medicine without a license. Do not say if you've done it or not, it doesn't matter. Do not say you did any type of surgery, those types of things. It's usually surgery because number one, that might get your supervisor in trouble because that is not allowed. Even if you're really good and you grew up with parents who are vets. That's why that is in there. Don't tell us how many spays you've done or neuters, things like that. We do get people that say that. They very well could have done it. However, it is illegal. So that's why I want people to understand what we mean by do not practice veterinary medicine without a license. And we do get a few of those every year. So that puts an extremely bad light on your application and also on whoever your supervisor was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to get that done before we went into
That's
that.
perfect. Thank you, Kathy. So then Megan asks, when documenting experience hours in the application, do we list specifics of what we've observed with each veterinarian, or is it supposed to be more generalized?
You want me to take that?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. You want to put down what you did or observed in each experience. We don't want it generalized. We want to know, okay, you know, you shadowed Dr. So-and-so, you know, for the past 3 months. We want to know what you actually saw in that experience. And then if you go to another experience, we want to know exactly what you did in that experience. So we don't want it kind of generalized. We want each experience individual.
Yeah. Okay. Here's a question. Oh man, where did it go? There we go. So as far as if they're in a research position for credit or teaching assistant credits, that would be maybe show up on their transcripts, would they enter them in there, or should they enter them in as an experience?
Okay. Basically both. If it's on your transcript, you need to put it in the transcript entry part. Just because Vimcast doesn't like it if you skip over stuff like that. Definitely it would be an experience if you're acting in like a TA, or you're doing certain research work and you're a research assistant as an undergraduate research assistant. Yes. Depending upon who your supervisor is, it could be animal, veterinary, or just regular research work. So you could put it in any of the categories, but definitely put that down as experience. Basically, it would be employment if you were getting paid and your supervisor, it had nothing to do with animals or veterinary. Otherwise, it would go under animal or veterinary. If your supervisor's veterinary experience. If it's working with animals, it would be animal experience.
Yeah, great, thank you. Someone asks, when listing our experiences in Vimcast, do they need to be in any specific order within their specific category? No, there's no, some people I think do it, from most amount of hours to fewest. Some do it, in chronological order. There's not really a specific order that you need.
Yeah, Vimcast will put it in chronological order, I believe, because I've asked that before, because I've tried to tell people to put their best experiences, what they consider their best experiences first, so that people see them. Vimcast will put them in a chronological order. It will just automatically be set up that way.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great questions coming out about experience. So let's take a few minutes and kind of tackle some of these. So what about middle school? So Alexa says, I volunteered at looks like a humane society from when I was in middle school for 2 years. Is that too long ago?
I guess I would put it in only because I can't answer for all the vet schools. Our committee would probably not consider it because basically of how far ago it was, how young you were at the time. But I would put it in because if you're applying to more than one school, I can't answer for other schools.
Mm-hmm. Great, yeah. Okay, so Kaylee says, would working with industry veterinarians be included under work experience? Animals are not interacted with physically. put that as veterinary experience. Anytime you're supervised with a veterinarian, so that's the one, I think, caveat to that flow chart is that there might also need to be something that says like, you know, was it related to animals? No. Was it supervised by a veterinarian? Yes. Then that is veterinary experience. You are seeing the profession. You're seeing a different side of the profession. So yeah, I mean, include that anytime you're working elbow to elbow with that veterinarian or supervising what, or, you know, kind of shadowing what they're doing is absolutely veterinary experience. Okay, great questions coming in. So do we list our experiences kind of like a resume? So as far as like, you know, you'll put in kind of that information, absolutely, dates, you know, average hours worked, all of that kind of stuff. And then in that description, bullet points, Kathy, or a paragraph, or kind of for that description, what should that look like?
You're limited in characters. I can't off the top of my head tell you how many, but it will tell you when you go in there how many characters. Bullet points are nice, but if you get too many, it'll be cut off.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
a listing is probably, with commas, is probably allows you more room. I guess I should say that.
Great.
Because they
Okay.
count empty space as well as filled spaces.
Fantastic. Okay, and I know we're getting short on time again. Man, we're gonna have to make this like 4 hours next year, but we will do another one of these a little bit later on in the summer too. And you can always email us with these questions, but we'll try and tackle just a few more questions here, and then we'll move on so we can get in those letters of recommendation as well. So would a pet sitting business, would that, since it's not necessarily your own pet ownership, would that constitute as animal experience?
It would constitute, again, depending upon what it was. If you had a pet sitting business and actually spent, you know, quite a few hours doing that each week, is different than pet sitting for your neighbor for, you know, once a summer when they went away on vacation. So if you actually did this, had a lot of clients, things like that, that would be considered by our committee. Again, if it's pet sitting for your neighbor or things like that, where it's not really a business, then our committee probably would not consider it.
Okay.
Again, I hate to tell people not to put anything in because some schools use it, and if you're applying to multiple schools, you need to put it in. It would just be that unless they can see, hey, yeah, this person really worked at this and had clients and all that, they would probably not consider it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, perfect. So what about an internship? So Coral asks a question about, you know, an internship through vet tech school. You know, it was technically college coursework, but obviously a lot of great experience as well. Can you include that?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Include your internships. The only thing one of the things that our committee looks for that I don't know if other committees do is they like to see you, it would definitely be considered. So yes, put it in, but they like to see it when somebody goes out and is self-motivated to go out and find their own experiences. This goes the same for people whose parents are vets and they've worked with their parents, you know, since they were 3 years old or whatever. They want to see that person go out on their own, that they're motivated enough to get their own experiences. I would definitely include an internship, but it's kind of like pre-set up for you. I would also say they would like to see you have some experiences that you've gone out and gotten on your own.
Great. Okay, perfect. So I know that we've got a lot more questions about experience here, but I also want to make sure that we get to those letters of recommendation. So we're going to push pause on experience just for a second. No, sorry, I've got a couple more points, I think, on experience, and then we'll go on to those letters of recommendation. And then also essays. Kathy, we haven't even gotten to essays. We may just work straight through our break this time, knowing that this is recorded. It's being recorded. So if you do need to, hit the restroom or something like that, go for it. We'll put this up in chunks on YouTube later too. But we've got a lot of good questions coming in. Keep them coming. We'll just kind of power through as fast as we can, knowing that, we can definitely, hopefully get to a lot of those questions or get to them via email later. So we wanted to say, watch your hours and dates of employment. This goes along with a question that I had, somewhere in here now. I think it was a pet sitter who said, well, what about overnight stays? Essentially be conservative for those overnight stays, really calculate those hours when you're maybe directly interacting with those animals, walking, feeding, playing, that kind of stuff. Obviously not the hours that you're sleeping. Our admissions committee will do math. Is the best way to say it. So these are some comments from our admissions committee. And you can see there that, we're thinking like, 204,000 hours of experience, is more than that, more hours than that candidate has been alive. Now, could you say probably they added an extra 0 or 2? Maybe it was a typo. So watch typos definitely, but also kind of be realistic and be conservative with those. I think our committee has set 200 hours of quality veterinary experience, which would be like shadowing, interning, vet assistant, those sorts of things where you're kind of, like we've talked about, directly observing that, what the career is all about. So that's, when we're talking about 200 hours versus 4 to 8 to 9 to 204,000 hours, is a lower benchmark, but that's because we want to kind of level the playing field. We know some students do have access to a ton of hours in a veterinary clinic, and some may not, for whatever reason. Maybe they're a non-traditional student. Maybe they needed to decide between observing for no pay at a veterinary clinic versus working at the grocery store so they can help pay bills, so we wanted to kind of even that out a little bit. So if you're conservative and realistic about your experiences, and as long as you've listed what you've done, our committee will read through it. Our committee will see it. So, as far as I think a lot of anxiety comes from, I hope I'm listing this right, and I hope I'm saying this right and everything. Our committee does read through it, and they'll be able to kind of do those calculations as well, for better or for worse.
Deanna, I want to say, when people do this, like we had a person this year list 24 hours a day for the entire 9 years that she'd had a pet. Deanna's right, be conservative, and I tell people, if you've grown up on a farm, I'm sure you've worked on the farm with animals quite a bit, but we're looking at for when you had real responsibilities. You might have, maybe you bottle fed some calves, but we want it when you're actually, your parents can let you go out. They say, do this. They don't have to worry about you. You do what you need to do. Don't get those farm hours way up. Again, it puts a very bad light. We get these comments because the committee does not like that application now, because they think the person isn't paying attention. So do pay attention, and remember, you're going to school, you're doing some things for fun, you might play sports. So you're not actually, even if you're growing up in an animal environment, you're not spending as much time as you think you are actually working with the animals. And again, we get people that they couldn't have slept, they couldn't have done anything else. So be realistic about that, because it can really hurt your application when they see things like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so let's move on to letters of recommendation, because I know that that is a good bulk of the questions that we have pending right now in our Q&A box. So 3 letters of recommendation are required. Kathy and I recommend 4 letters, essentially because then even if someone misses that deadline, you still have the required 3 letters of recommendation. So you kind of have a little bit of a buffer there. We will accept up to 6 letters of recommendation, and our committee will read those 6. They should be well-rounded, kind of a well-rounded view. So I know that there were a couple of questions in there. You know, if I've worked with 2 veterinarians at the same practice, should I ask for a letter from both of those? So we do strongly encourage you to have at least to have 1 letter from a veterinarian. But because we also want those to be kind of well-rounded, if you have 2 veterinarians that you've worked with in 2 separate capacities, so maybe you're at a mixed animal practice and you spend some time, working with small or companion animals with one veterinarian, and then you go out and make farm calls with another veterinarian, that's fantastic. If you have, like a 3, doctor practice, where they're all seeing small animals, it may not be beneficial to ask all 3 for a letter. Ask for 1, because then you're getting that, that good letter of recommendation. But so I wouldn't maybe double up on people who are going to kind of see you doing the same experiences. It's way better for those recommenders to know you well rather than to be well known. I feel like, and I'm not sure if Kathy, maybe every year is an overstatement, but a lot of years I know Kathy's shared with me that, people try and impress us with like the state senator or the president of their university. And that's great if those people know you well, but we would rather have someone who knows you well than someone who, has a prestigious position who may not know you and is going to essentially submit a form letter for us. It is okay to ask for a good letter or a great letter of recommendation. So I know it's harder with COVID now to take somebody out for a cup of coffee or whatever, but maybe you have a Zoom coffee chat or, something, but, really talk to them about, hey, do you feel comfortable writing me a great letter of recommendation? That's different than, hey, can I get a letter of rec for this vet school? Talk to them about maybe what you, are, excited about as far as vet school. Send them a copy of your resume. And maybe ask specifically, hey, I know, that you, when I was working, under you, I got promoted from, a regular sales associate to a shift manager or a shift supervisor. Could you maybe talk about my leadership skills? It's okay to have that kind of in-depth conversation, as far as that letter of recommendation goes. I've heard from people who recommend or who write those letters that that's really helpful for them to kind of give them an idea of the direction you're going to. Just like it's hard for you to write an essay that says like, why do you want to be in vet school? Having that letter of like, hey, what are your specific career goals and why, is a little bit easier to write. It's the same thing for those those recommenders. They must not be related to you by blood or marriage. So that's another reason why we don't require one from a veterinarian, is because you might have a family member who's a veterinarian. You've done the bulk of your vet hours there. They can't write you a letter of recommendation. So they cannot be related by blood or by marriage. Those are our recommenders. Those are the requirements for or kind of requirements or guidelines for those recommendations. We don't have specific expectations as far as one from an academic, one from a researcher, blah, blah, blah. We understand that some schools do have that. And if you go by their guidelines, that'll work for us as well. So we don't have kind of specific, like who should write you a letter of recommendation other than that. Please, this is a good reason to kind of have that conversation because you want them, to be able to give you this sort of a letter. It's specific, it's positive, it talks about who this applicant is and some of their attributes. So this is an awesome, we hope that all of your recommenders, look like this. However, in some cases, they look like this. So it's good to kind of have that, really think through who your recommenders are and who, might give you that letter.
And it happens every year, so make sure you do know who you're asking for your letters of recommendation. Because this probably make a phone call necessary. It usually goes downhill from there.
Yeah. Okay. So before we move on, I just kind of want to quickly skim through and make sure that I'm getting most of those letters of recommendation. Actually, Kathy, if you want to maybe go over a little bit, we do have COVID impacts on here. Do you kind of want to go over this stuff a little bit, and I'll weed through some of the questions?
Okay, yep, that's fine. Things that are also going to be looked at in your application, community service and leadership honors and awards. This just shows you don't overload the committee with a ton of these. That is why we actually ask for the top 5 and top 4, because people will have 2 or 3 pages of this, and our committee is looking at, and most committees are, a whole lot of applications, and if you have too much in there, you lose them. You need to put what you feel is the most important and reflects what you have done and your values the best. Community service and leadership has become more and more important. When I started years ago, it was basically, okay, how many veterinary hours of experience do you have, and do you have a 4-point? Now, community service, they're looking for somebody to give back. They are looking for people that have had various leadership experiences, becoming very important, and these things can pull you up above what is, what is considered an average student. The other thing is personal development. Looking at, basically, it's getting to know and working with people and cultures that are different than yourself. And that doesn't mean you have to do foreign travel. It can be working with, Special Olympics, possibly. There's a lot of, I know, equine therapy that work with a whole variety of people, maybe that you haven't worked with before. Going to another country, exploring just cultures within the United States, somebody that, lives in the inner city, working with people there when you come from a rural background. It's developing skills you might have, developing skills for anything, dance, photography, all those types of things, but developing them to a level where you can be considered maybe not an expert, but close to that. Being bilingual is also getting to be extremely important, just due to the way the United States is right now. It's got so many different people here. A lot of them don't speak English, and they may be your clients. So those are things to look into. The special circumstances, that's the explanation statement. We generally, our committee looks at it for people to tell us something that may have impacted them negatively, and how they kind of went through that, and what they did to come out of that circumstance. It can be anything from being in a car accident one semester and losing half your semester, something like that. It can be various personal problems that may come in with family members being ill, or various things happening to your family that puts you at a disadvantage. We use it for that. Our committee doesn't really care that, well, I had a bad semester and I got a C in my organic chem instead of the A I wanted. They're not going to look at that. They're looking for something that really impacted your life. And that's what they're looking for in the explanation. Again, put how COVID may have impacted you. It is very important. They will look at it. Some schools are mandatory. You have to take everything pass, not pass when it went online. Some are allowing people to choose. We will accept that. Again, the impact on experiences, as Deanna stated, if you had, if you had planned an experience and only got in 2 weeks of the experience because everything shut down after that, tell them, let them know that. And again, the transcripts, there's going to be leeway with transcripts because of however schools are, I believe, California State is doing everything online. We don't know, some schools may not have their people in working on getting transcripts out, all those different things. There may be delays. We are going to take that all into account. If you have, if that has impacted you some way, you need to discuss it in the explanation statement, because I know it's been all over the place for different people. Some are not hardly impacted at all. Others, it's caused a lot of trouble in their life. So please make sure you put that in the explanation statement. Have questions?
Great. Perfect. Thanks, Kathy. Let's see. I'm just finishing up, going through questions here. There are a lot of questions as far as it, kind of circling back to experience just for a second. Well, no, hold on. We'll get to your questions about experience. Definitely. But let's finish up here first. I want to make sure that there's nothing else here. Sorry for the dead air time, but I want to make sure we're getting it. So the explanation statement, are we looking kind of for an essay there, or like sweet, simple, to the point?
Sweet, simple, and to the point. Tell them how you were impacted by different things, what you tried to do to overcome that, kind of like what the end result was. Yes, they're just looking for the information, so you don't have to do everything like a perfect essay. It's just, they want the information, how it impacted you, things like that. That's short and sweet is perfect there.
Great. Okay, so we've got a lot of good questions here. I do want to tackle essays because I think that will also bring up some good questions. And then again, I know we kind of blew through that 10-minute break from 11:50 to 11 or till 12, but we're just going to keep on rolling so we can get as many questions as we can in for you during this kind of time. The hard stop we'll have is that our veterinary students will come in at 12:30. And so I want to make sure that they have their time as well. And then if we have time after that, we can kind of clean up some questions, and we'll clean up questions as they're chatting through too. But let's switch gears. And Kathy, I don't know, I did see some more coursework questions in the open questions. So if you want to tackle those, you can.
I can.
Otherwise, we can do them kind of verbally too. But great. Let's continue on to essays. Okay. So we'll really tackle, so these are the essay questions. They're in VimCast currently. And then you can, you can find those in there. They are 2,000 characters each. I have sat down with a couple of students, and they have talked about 2,000 word essays. They're not 2,000 words. That's way too long. You won't be able to copy and paste that into your VimCast application. So 2,000 characters. So it is a little bit on the shorter side, but these are the questions that we're hoping that you'll tackle. Those are general VimCast questions. Then Iowa State has a supplemental question. I'm sorry, that shouldn't say supplemental application. It should say supplemental question. So let's see if I can do this here. So this here needs to say question, not application, because this question, and then the 2 additional questions for Nebraska residents, and then the DVM MBA program is going to be in the VimCast application under program materials and then under questions. So that question there, along with those other ones, that the DVM MBA question is going to be in that. I know that there was a question about that in our Q&A box, but that's going to be in that VimCast portion. Okay, so here's some things to consider. Obviously, use your space wisely. This box here is about 2,000 characters, so about 4-ish paragraphs, depending on how you write those. I would absolutely encourage you to write them in Word or something like that first, and then copy and paste them into VimCast. When you copy and paste them, definitely read through it one more time. Because sometimes character limits between Word and the VimCast will change. And so I know some students who've like lost the last, half sentence or, whatever on their essay. So definitely proofread it one last time before you hit submit. But that's about what 2,000 characters look like. So things to consider about that. Please proofread. Have one grammar expert look at it, just simply so that you know that not only did autocorrect not fail you, but that you have the correct usages of different words, especially veterinary versus veterinarian. So veterinary is a describing word. Veterinarian is a noun. So that's one thing that autocorrect or spell check won't catch. But your friend, family member, or whoever that is a grammar expert would be able to catch that. And then one personal reviewer, somebody who knows you well, who can say, oh my gosh, I remember you talking about, you wanting to maybe, pursue that master's of public health, because you've been super interested, or, you did this one experience and there's nothing about how impacted you were about, veterinary medicine in the public health field, so things like that somebody who knows you really well can be like, ooh, maybe you want to talk about this, or, something like that. So that can kind of go through, make sure everything makes sense, and kind of give you some good pointers that way. Be realistic with those career goals. So when that future, what are your future career goals? Be realistic. If you don't know what you want to, what kind of veterinarian you want to be, that's okay to say that, back that up with what things you've learned about the veterinary profession and why you want to go into veterinary medicine. So, you know, maybe you don't know whether you want to work with large animals or small animals, but here's what intrigues you about the medical profession that you're applying for. You know, maybe you know, really want to be able to, you know, help out, you know, animal shelters. That's awesome. That may not help you, like if you do all pro bono work, that's not really going to be realistic with the amount of student loans that you may be coming out of vet school with. So, you know, how are you going to balance that, pay back your student loans and be able to help out? Same thing with, you know, like exotic medicine or conservation medicine and those sorts of things. Those are awesome. That career field is really small. And sometimes that career field is maybe one of the underpaid career fields. So how are you going to, you know, get that path there? You know, so kind of be realistic there. I know some students who are like, hey, I'm really jazzed about exotic medicine. This is what I, you know, have experienced. I understand that, you know, it may take me a few years to break into that field. So here's what I'm going to do, or here are my plans in the meantime, you know, that sort of thing. So whether it's, you know, exactly what you want to do, and it's like this super niche, you know, area of veterinary medicine, write about that and be realistic. Whether it's what, you know, I have no clue, that's okay. Whether it's small animal medicine, you know, back up those things. What are your career goals? Tell us. Use examples, like I said, kind of, you don't have to regurgitate all of your experiences, but, you know, maybe you've got a couple of key examples of like, oh, I really got hooked on equine medicine, you know, when I was able to, you know, help a mom and a foal, you know, on their road to recovery or whatever, you know, whatever that looks like. Kind of use those examples, or use a couple of key examples to kind of back up your essays. Also answer the question. Please answer the question. I know it's easy to like kind of go off on tangents. I do it when I'm talking to all of you. But you definitely want to make sure that you're focused in answering those essay questions. And then please be professional. So, you know, think about your, I know that there was a question about essentially, how do we measure communication skills? You know, without that interview, how do we get to know people? We get to know them through things like the essays. So yes, you want a little bit of your personality to shine through. However, you want to be professional. Make sure that you or that you're, you know, communicating that you understand that you're going into a professional program in order to become a, you know, member of a medical field. So while, you know, your cat that got hit by a car and the veterinarian, you know, was so instrumental in your life when you were 6, that's a great thing that kind of sparked your interest in veterinary medicine. But now, you know, 14, 16, 20 years later, what is making you want to go into this profession? What is making you want to be a veterinarian? So kind of take that, you know, whatever that spark of veterinary medicine was, that's great. What made you, you know, stick through, you know, while everybody else was, you know, going out and having fun and all of those sorts of things? Why were you, you know, or sleeping in on a Saturday morning? Why did you show up to that veterinary clinic every single day, or, you know, every single week or whatever? But so make those essays professional, mature, you know, focused in that way. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. Kathy, did I leave anything out?
I'm sorry, I'm answering questions. I can't tell you.
That's okay. That's okay. I think I got everything. But if you have specific essay questions, we're happy to help out with those. Okay, we're not going to take breaks. Sorry. Okay, and I've seen these questions here, so we're going to tackle these couple first, and then kind of weave through some of those questions. So let's go with a couple that were on along these lines. How many seats are available in each class? So we have 158 seats currently for each class. About 60 of those seats are reserved for students from the state of Iowa. About 28 seats are reserved for students in the 2+2 program, which is a specific program for Nebraska residents. So if you're not a Nebraska resident, you are not eligible for that 2+2 program. If you are a Nebraska resident and need more information on that 2+2 program, definitely let us know about that, or contact Dr. McPhee, and I can give you her, I can repost her contact information in the chat. It's in there currently though. So we have, let's see, 60 seats for students from the state of Iowa, 28 for the students from the state of Nebraska. Then we have 4 contract positions for students from the state of North Dakota. And then that leaves us with about 66 seats for students from essentially all over the country. And including, and then I should say, and additionally, US territories and international countries as well. So, so those 66 seats are reserved for essentially, you know, everybody else who's not from those 3 states, Nebraska, North Dakota, and Iowa. As an out-of-state student, what are your chances? That really depends on your or the applicant pool, I would say, and how strong your application is. However, Kathy and I were talking about this. We had about, was it about 1,000? Or was it closer to 900 that were reviewed, out-of-state students that were reviewed by our committee?
It was closer to 900.
Closer to 900. And for this, in order to fill our class this year, we went to almost, or we went to about 300 on our alternate list.
Not actually on the alternate list. We went through our top 328 students.
Okay, so, okay. So
the alternates come after our initial admits.
Correct. Okay, yep, I misspoke. So of those 900 applicants that were reviewed by our committee, about, or 328 were received, you know, an offer of admission. Obviously not all of those took those offers, but kind of so through our initial admits and then rolling on our wait list. So if you're a standout student, it could be a third, you know, like 33% chance of getting in, essentially. Okay, yep, we tackled that one. Great. So each of those categories that I talked about, so Iowa students, North Dakota students, Nebraska students, and then everyone else, they get evaluated within their same pool. So essentially, like, the out-of-state students are quote unquote competing for those about 66 seats. However, everyone is reviewed by the same committee, the same admissions committee. They all go through that same standard. So just kind of focusing on, you know, these, like, what is it, how do I make my application stand out, all of that kind of stuff. Before we get to some of the specific things. Okay.
Deanna,
Yep.
while you're looking at that, Miranda had a question about, will your application be seen by both committees? And I guess there's only one committee. You will be, if you're a Nebraska resident, it's seen by the Nebraska committee. If anybody else is seen by the Iowa State's admissions committee. So I wasn't quite sure what that question meant, but I wanted to make sure it got straightened out.
Yep, that's perfect. And what I would say is to clarify that as far as the students who are not from the state of Nebraska, so essentially everyone else but the students from the state of Nebraska, your application will be gone through that academic review first. And then the students who qualify academically will then move on to the committee. So most students will be seen will go through that academic review and the committee review. However, those students who fall below our academic standards will not be seen by the committee. So that's kind of how that works. It's one and then the other. Hopefully that helped too. We've got a question also from Miranda. Has the virus dramatically changed the number of admitted students for the class of 2021? Or I mean, sorry, for 2021, that would be the class of 2025. No, we are looking at approximately the same number of admitted students currently. So it won't drastically change. Great, lots of really great questions. Just looking to see if we have any that are kind of general, and then we'll start just kind of going down the line here. Lots on experiences, good. Great. Perfect. Okay, so man, we've answered 100 questions. That's amazing. Okay, so now, so how do I make my application stand out? Honestly, that's what the last kind of hour has been about, making sure you've got those quality letters of recommendation, those, a good handle on a professional, response to those essays. Good experiences. We look for at least 200 hours of experience. And then or of quality veterinary experience. And then I'll put these up as well. These are just some kind of, bonus tips for you. A lot of times, unfortunately, you guys, we get students every year that, essentially we're not able to look at their application because they didn't read the instructions. They didn't realize they needed, transcripts from every single one of their institutions that they've taken a college course at. They haven't, double checked. They haven't been in communication with us. Those sorts of things are really things that are, fixes that are easy, fixes, and things that you just kind of have to be really detail oriented on. So, these are things that
I was just going to say, just so they get an idea, we had almost 300 applicants that we denied due to what I call technical difficulties, had nothing to do with their experience, their grades, or anything. They just didn't get the application in correctly. Some didn't actually put in their essays, like Deanna had said. So there's all this. Just make sure you go through and do everything. Some just didn't look at their status pages, either VMCAS or ours. The information is all there, so you know if something is maybe going wrong. So that's a lot of people that paid money that we just had to say, sorry, you don't have a complete application. We can't look at it.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so question, we're going to tackle these Q&A or this Q&A box here for the next about 12 minutes as our panelists, our students get logged on here and get all set to go. So Sarah asks, are there any advantages to getting the application complete early in the application timeline, like submitting it in June compared to July or August? It really depends. So we will not consider pending experiences or planned experiences. So if you have an experience that you're still able to do this summer and you hit submit in June, maybe you've only done a week of that experience. That's what we're going to look at. Where if you submit in July or August, we're going to see a little bit more of that. Same thing with summer coursework. If you're planning on taking summer coursework, you may, and those grades, you know, may help your GPA a little bit. You may want to wait until July or August if you can get those transcripts in. I would say applying, submitting your application before the deadline will help, that it will help us and help you in that if anything comes up where we have a question or something doesn't get done, or VMCAS says, hey, you know, your transcripts, you need to re-enter your transcripts, all of that, you have more time to do it before that, you know, that deadline. I know I've talked with Kathy before, and she's like, you know, I can help students with a lot of different things before the deadline, but once that September 15th deadline comes up, or even that week of the deadline comes up, we have students who will frantically on September 14th email about something, and you know, there's just not enough time to help with that, not enough turnaround time. So applying, what we were talking about at Thursday, Kathy, like 2 to 3 weeks early is probably okay, but
Yeah, but don't wait until the last minute. That's one of the things. I even get people calling me after the deadline. Sorry, you didn't get a transcript into VMCAS. We can't do anything. Well, can't I send it to you? No, we only take things through VMCAS. So if you even have a hint that there's something might be going wrong, like you've asked for this transcript twice and it still isn't showing up, let me know ahead of time. I can help you we can try to work through it. Depending upon what your problems are, I may be able to take an unofficial transcript. I guess that's when I can do it, but we can work through these things, but you have to give me time to do it. And if you call me after the deadline because you didn't look at our status page or our message board, which told you, I had one person call me in February when they had been told in December what was wrong with their application through our message board. They never got to it. They were extremely upset with me that I said, I can't do anything now, but that's what happened. So keep on top of your application. We really want you to apply. We want you to have a, you know, good consideration, but I can't do that if there's something technically wrong and you didn't give me a heads up on what was happening.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. So we've got a question here. Would disclosing a diagnosis of a mental illness or learning disability, how it impacted you and things you've done to overcome that or deal with that, be looked at negatively or positively?
Definitely would be a positive. We have a lot of students with various cognitive disabilities, and if you can tell them, hey, I got diagnosed with this, this is what I've been doing to overcome it, this is how I've helped myself, definitely you'll be looked at as a very mature student, and it can only help you. Disabilities are kind of like par for the course now, both mental and physical. So that would definitely be something that would be taken into consideration at that point. That should go in the special explanation statement. So it would definitely be a positive for you, if you can tell them what you've done to overcome it, not just say, well, I didn't do good because I've been diagnosed with it. That won't get you anywhere. But if you say, hey, I was diagnosed with this problem and here's what, you know, the doctors and I have been working together to get this overcome. So look at it in a professional manner. It can only help you.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thanks, Kathy. I have a number of extracurricular activities that I have enjoyed, but were not part of a specific organization. How should I include these?
I would just say as hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
If you've really delved into them, they don't want to hear a lot about, you know, all these different things you've done. But if you have something that, although you didn't belong to an organization, photography is one that we see frequently, where you might not have belonged to a photography club or something like that, but you've been doing this for the past, you know, 10 years since you were in middle school, and you've developed that, and tell them, you know, why, you know, what that activity has meant to you. So definitely include it, but don't just include because you know, hey, I started coin collecting and then I did this, and I, you know, I like to go out and fish and things like that. Not like that, but if you've delved into and gotten some expertise in an area, definitely put it down.
Great. Okay. Kathy, so I'm in the Q&A box. The top one is about in the prereq courses, you asked for physiology, but would zoology work?
Depends upon what the zoology course is. A lot of people say zoology, but zoology is just like saying animal science. Animal science courses, there's a whole myriad of different topics. Zoology is the same way. Zoology, general zoology, no, that will not work. For our anatomy and physiology, we want a course that specifically deals with either or both anatomy and physiology and overviews all the systems, all the organ systems. So general zo will not do that. There might be a zoology course out there that does that very well. I would need to know exactly what course, the institution, the course department and number that you were talking about, and then I can give a good answer to that, because zoology can cover a lot of different topics.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. So Ariel is looking for information on the PhD program. Do you apply for that now, or do you wait till you get accepted? Do you know, Kathy, offhand?
Okay. You can do it any way you want. You can, we do not have a combined where you have to apply to both at one time. You can do it combined. We just don't have a specific track, I guess, for a PhD DVM combined track. A lot, not a lot, but there are several people doing this. The one thing that you need to be, that we try, and I don't know what your experiences are and everything, we ask that people take their first semester and try not to do anything else. I know people, and some people understand what the changes that will come in vet school, some don't. We try to tell people, don't do anything until you're, until you have an idea of how you're doing in vet school. The changes you may need to make to studying and all that. That's just to put you on, because if people try to do too much at one time, it can hurt their DVM program. The other thing is, when you are doing that program, the DVM takes precedence. So if your DVM grade goes, or cum GPA goes, I believe it's a 2.5. I'm not the one who handles this, so I could be wrong with that. But if it goes below a certain GPA, you cannot continue your graduate program. The DVM program, if you're in the DVM program, always takes precedence. You can apply for both separately. That's not a bad thing. It's just that, again, we encourage people to do one semester of vet school just to get a feeling for what it's like before they take on a job or additional coursework and things like that.
Yep. Great. Okay, so I know we're coming up here to our fantastic students who are going to give you a little bit more information. One of the things, just kind of as a blanket statement, I've gotten a lot of these questions here, is exactly what sort of experience is, so we talked about that experience where please do not, perform veterinary medicine without a license. There's a lot that's like, hey, does this, qualify as performing veterinary medicine, blah, blah, blah. Ask your veterinarian, honestly. I don't know if you know specifically, Kathy, and I'm sure it varies.
Basically people that will say they have done certain surgeries. Assisting as a tech in a veterinary clinic is not what I'm talking about. It's if you come in and say, okay, well, this client brought this dog in and I decided, I don't know, I made the diagnosis and I told the client what to do. No, you didn't. You might have told the client after the veterinarian, and you didn't diagnose the dog, the veterinarian diagnosed the dog. It's when people put in first person that they did it versus the veterinarian doing it. Because I did have one on questions like counting out pills and things like that. No, and drawing blood and giving vaccines. But if you say, I determined what vaccines this animal needed and gave them to it, that would be practicing medicine without a license. Again, saying you did the diagnosis or you did the surgery. That is, and we get people that say I did the surgery not frequently, but we get them every year. Those are the things I'm talking about. If you're a tech at a clinic, anything that the veterinarian tells you to do is appropriate. Just don't put it in the first person. Put it as if I was told that I could do this or things like that. Just don't take on, say, because people want you to think, or they want the committee to think, well, I can do all this. Well, you're doing it under the supervision of a veterinarian. So again, just don't say, I did a diagnosis, I determined what was good for this animal, what wasn't, I did the surgery. Don't do that. Anything should be under the supervision of a veterinarian. And the other thing is, especially it's surgeries that are the most important, you don't say, I did the surgery under the supervision of a veterinarian. Again, that is not legal.
Mhm.
So
Assisting
don't
with
ever say,
benefit. Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. That sounds good. And then